Since I've been kind of recording anyway today, I figured it would be nice to go over problem 1161 in the text. 1161 deals with the net realizable value method of allocating those joint costs. So in this problem, we have three products, beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3. And in three departments, distilling, fusing, and solidifying. In the distilling department, this first department here, this is where our joint activities are. Beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3 are all processed in the distilling department. When beta 1's done, it is automatically sold. B2, however, this one is processed further in the fusing department. And beta 3, once it's done with our distilling department, it is processed further in the solidifying department. So if that didn't make too much sense, do me a favor and take some time reading through this paragraph again so you can understand the big picture of how this company in particular works, which departments are joint processes, and which departments are involving some additional processing. So the first item that they want us to find here is the net realizable value for beta 1. So beta 1, they tell us, remember we're talking about net realizable value, so we are dealing with some sales values there. And they tell us that for beta 1, they had $225,000 in sales. And if this $225,000 was for all of our units produced, if we sold all of our units produced, this would be our answer for the NRV, the net realizable value. But this $225,000 is for 180,000 units. So what we can do is kind of work backwards here to find out what the sales value per gallon is. And then we can use this to multiply it by the total gallons that were produced during the period. In this case, we can kind of work backwards because luckily everyone learned basic cost flows back in our exam 1 material. So we know that we can work backwards here. So ending inventory gallons plus our gallons sold are going to give us our total that were available for sale. So those were the total value at once we go ahead, or total gallons that we can analyze here. So we had a total, if we add those two together, of 300,000 gallons that we were dealing with within this period. So $1.25 times 300,000 gallons, that gives us an NRV of 375,000 for beta 1. Now for B, they want us then to find the joint cost for the year ended November 30th. So when we're taking a look at B, remember our focus is on joint costs. So ask yourself, which department were their joint activities? Department 1 deals with all three, Department 2 only deals with the further processing of 2, and then Department 3 deals with just the further processing of beta 3. So this is the only department where they're processing all these together where we have our joint costs. So the cost of this department, 720,000 plus 180,000 plus 150,000, those are our joint costs. And that's what we're going to have to allocate. Now, when we're getting to C, C wants to know the cost of beta 2 sold for the year ended November 30th. So in order to do this, if we're trying to find the cost of beta 2 that was sold during the year, we're first going to have to allocate those fixed costs we just found. So we need the net realizable value of all three. So for beta 1, we already found that net realizable value in step A. We found that that was 375,000. Now when it comes to beta 2, we are going to have to work through that one. Now remember, beta 2 has some specific costs, and that's where that net portion of that net realizable value, it's that sales value minus any additional costs that were incurred to process it. So let's start by finding sales value. In this case, we don't have to do the funky math. like we did before, because there is no ending inventory. Everything we produced, we sold. So that 720,000, that is going to be our starting point for B1. So let me kind of put it down. I'll put my notes over here. So we're starting with a sales value of 720,000. And now to make that net realizable value, we have to minus out any of those processing further costs. Since the fusing department, Department 2, is the one that deals with Beta 2, those are Beta 2's costs. They belong to no one else. So we're going to minus out those costs. All right, and our result for the net realizable value for our Beta 2 will be 225,000. Now when it comes to B3's net realizable value, we're going to have to do a little bit more. We're going to have to do something similar to what we did in A, because the amount sold doesn't equal the total amount produced. So let's start by finding the sales value per unit sold. So 1,063,125 was the total. That is divided amongst 540,000 sold units. Do some math. Ooh, sorry, not registering. 1,063,125. So that gives us an interesting number. I'm not even going to write that in. I'm just going to multiply it, see what I get from there. And I'm also going to check that math, so bear with me. I don't really like how that turned out, but we'll see. And then we are going to have to go ahead, and that result is going to get multiplied by the total units that were, or I should say gallons that were produced for a Beta 3. And add those together, that gives us 720,000. So let's multiply that by 720,000 and see if it gives us a little bit of a cleaner number. Oh, that one's better. So we find that the sales value of those is 1,417,500. But since that's sales value, we also have to take out those further processing costs in order to find our net realizable value. So in solidifying, which is the only one that has to do with B3 here, or B3 is the only one that it deals with, we're going to have to minus out those additional costs. So we have our sales value. Let's minus out those additional costs to process Beta 3. All right, we minus all of those out. And that gives us a net realizable value of Beta 3 of 525,000. So we're just kind of learning some skills and just building on it. So now that we have the net realizable value of all three of those products, let's go ahead and add it together, and then that is going to give us the total that we can use. All right. So total cost 1,120,000, or total NRV, my bad, sorry, 1.125 million. So now remember, our focus is on B2. So we want to find out how much of those joint costs that we solved in B should be allocated to Beta 2. So Beta 2 has 225,000 of the total NRV of 1.125 million. So they're going to take 20% of the total joint costs. So Beta 2 is going to get allocated 210,000 in joint costs. Now that you have that $210,000 that are involved there, we have to consider if there are any additional processing costs involved with beta 2. And as we learned before, yes. We only know the joint cost. They're looking for our total cost, the cost of the beta 2 that were sold. So in this case, we also need those additional costs that were incurred once we got to that fusing department for beta 2. So that would be, remember these joint costs, these were the materials that were incurred previously. Now we're adding in direct labor of $337,500 and overhead of $157,500. And we add those all up and we find that our total cost for B2 is $705,000. So a little bit more intense, that one, but let's keep going. Oh, and by the way, one thing I should point out, notice that they are asking for the cost of the beta 2 that were sold during the year. Normally what we would have to do is we would have to divide out that total cost between the units sold and the units in ending inventory, just like we learned previously with basic cost flows. But in this case, since there is no ending inventory, all of the units, that total cost is simply the units sold. So this problem was kind of friendly to us in that way. So Part D is asking for the value of ending inventory for beta 1. Now this one shouldn't be as long as our Part C, because all they want us to know is what is the cost of those 120,000 units. Now this is where we get into some practice of what I was just talking about with beta 2. Beta 2, we sold all the units, there was nothing in ending inventory, so we didn't have to divide the costs amongst anything. Beta 1, those costs are for a total of 300,000 units. Some of them were sold, some are left over. So what we need to find first is what was the total cost for beta 1? Well, beta 1's only cost had to do with the distilling department, and so the only part of the distilling department that belongs to beta 1 is joint costs. So we have to figure out how much of this joint cost belongs to beta 1. And how do we do that? The Nrv method, which luckily we already found that information earlier. So beta 1 has 375,000 of the total net realizable value of 1.125 million. So they're getting a portion. Let me see, was that like, ooh, we're going to try that again because that math didn't come out right. 375,000 divided by 1,125,000. That's better, 33%. So they're going to be getting a third of those joint costs. So they are going to be getting 350,000. So 350,000 is the joint cost that we are allocating to beta 1. Now ask yourself, did beta 1 have any further processing costs? No, because beta 1, as soon as it's done, it's sold. So since it doesn't have any further processing costs, those are the only costs we have to deal with for beta 1. Now we simply have to find out how much of that 350,000 is sold and how much is ending inventory. And they're really asking ending inventory. So we're going to take those $350,000 in costs. We're going to divide it by the 300,000, sorry, I keep saying units, but gallons, to find the cost per gallon. So we get a funky number, $1.17, something like that. So we know that each unit is valued at, or I should say has a cost of 1.16 continuous. So we're going to multiply that by the units that are in ending inventory, sorry, gallons in ending inventory, 120,000 gallons. So we are finding that it's essentially about, I guess I should do that. Whatever our answer was here times our 120,000 in ending inventory, and that gives us 140,000 is the cost of the gallons that are in ending inventory for B1. So as you are going through these different pieces, I am going to be uploading a quiz, practice quiz I should say, a practice quiz for cost accounting chapters 10 and 11. So I will upload that onto our Blackboard. If you look at the last page, it will have the answers. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. I will try to keep my webcam handy over the next few days so that I can answer any questions you have in more of a visual format if need be. But in the meantime, happy studying. Keep up the hard work. Thank you so much.